you know that I prefer to focus almost 100% of the time on things happening in this country and to this country, especially those things which may most immediately impact your family and your children. Those kinds of issues serve as the nucleus of this show, and it's not because events across the world are unimportant in the grand scheme. It's just that we can only focus our attention on a limited number of things and solve a limited number of problems, and so I choose those things and problems which are closest to us. As it happens, our own society is in the grip of several crises all at once. Cataclysms which are only accelerating the fall and decay of our once great civilization. I don't think we have the luxury to spend very much time trying to fix the world's problems, even if it would be otherwise wise and noble to try, which it isn't, in my view. Our attention is urgently needed in our own communities and households. We can't afford to take the eye off of that ball. We can't wander off into the wilderness searching for far-off dragons to slay because we have more than enough of them here, though they may take different forms from what you find elsewhere on Earth. All of that is a long way of saying that the situation in Afghanistan is not the sort of thing I would normally talk about on this show. As you've heard, I'm sure, Biden moved to finally withdraw our troops from Afghanistan, but apparently had no real plan for evacuating everybody safely. The Taliban moved in, took over the country in about 2 days, while the Afghan army and government fled into the night like real heroes. Now, Afghanistan is back in the spot it was in 20 years ago, only it's worse, really, because the Taliban claims possession of all of the munitions and artillery that we left behind. So with all of that going on, I'm going to make an exception to my normal rule, at least for today, and offer a few comments about all of this. I'm not an expert on Afghanistan, but then again, the experts on Afghanistan, much like the public health experts here in the U.S., have largely created the very problems that they're supposed to be the experts on solving. So it once again falls to rational people to use common sense to sort through all of this. And that's what I'll try to do now. On that end, 3 primary points I think need to be made. First of all, there's no question that Biden's withdrawal has been handled so poorly that to use a word like poorly is to pay Biden an undue compliment. The President of the United States, who may or may not be conscious and cognizant right now, who knows, is hunkered down in Camp David and refusing to address the American people or explain his strategy. I mean, last night it was announced that even Biden's press secretary, Psaki, will be MIA for the next week. You know, the people that tried to send her an email got a form response saying, I'll be back in about a week. Hope there's nothing urgent that you need. The Biden regime is literally in hiding as the U.S.-installed Afghan regime surrenders the country to the Taliban and Americans in the country are left stranded. So the only real question now is whether Biden knew that it would go this way and lied, or if he's really so clueless and mentally degraded at this point that he believed the nonsense he spewed at a press conference just a month ago. Let's listen to that again. This was back in early July. Here's what he said about leaving Afghanistan and how he expected it would go. Let's watch.
Is a Taliban takeover of Afghanistan now inevitable?
No, it is not. Because you have the Afghan troops have 300,000 well equipped as any army in the world, and an air force against something like 75,000 Taliban. It is not inevitable.
Mr. President, thank you very much. Your own intelligence community has assessed that the Afghan government will likely collapse.
That is not true.
Can you please clarify what they have told you about whether that will happen or not?
That is not true. They did not reach that conclusion.
So what is the level of confidence that they have that it will not collapse?
The Afghan government and leadership has to come together. They clearly have the capacity to sustain the government in place.
Yeah, about that. Well, the Afghan government did collapse, and the Afghan military didn't even so much as put up a fight. They came together on the road as they were getting their asses out of there. I'm not sure if a single shot was actually fired in defense of Kabul. It was always clear to all intelligent people that the withdrawal from Afghanistan would play out this way. Biden should have built a plan which accounts for that, but instead he denied the obvious facts on the ground and planned for a leisurely, peaceful exit, one where I guess the Afghan government and military waves goodbye to our troops as they leave and shouts, "We'll take care of things here. Y'all have a safe trip home now." The Taliban look on from their caves, decide that it would be rude to move in and undo all of America's hard work over the past 2 decades. No, we're not going to do that. That would be, that's not fair. That's what Biden imagined, or at least wanted us to imagine. I'm willing to believe that he himself actually did imagine that, given that his brain is operating at 40% capacity at best and was never terribly powerful, even with all of its batteries fully charged. But the people actually running the administration, those who are really in charge of our government, and we don't know exactly who those people are by design, knew that it would be a bloodbath on the way out, and were apparently okay with that. For this reason, much of the criticism that Biden is sustaining right now is completely justified and 100% warranted. There are even calls for him to resign, which are also warranted, though we should always keep in mind that, what's waiting in the wings will not be by any stretch of the imagination an improvement. But second point, with all that said, many of the people on the right and on the left who are complaining about the exit from Afghanistan are upset, apparently, that we are exiting from Afghanistan at all. For these people, the issue is not just the manner of the exit, but the fact of the exit. They believe that even after 20 years, America still owes a debt to Afghanistan and must remain there indefinitely. And from what I've noticed, by the way, there are a lot of people on this side of the debate who, up till a month ago, were claiming to be non-interventionist. There are many Republicans right now, and again, we're leaving it. Yes, it was handled poorly. I got that. Moving on from that discussion, there are many so-called or alleged non-interventionist conservatives who have completely dropped that now, just like that. Trump made it cool to be a non-interventionist conservative. And so a lot of conservatives, especially in the Republican Party and prominent ones in media, kind of pretended to be that. And now many of them are fully back on board with, no, let's stay there forever. I mean, let's literally stay there forever. Yes. And many of the people on this side of the debate like to point out that America still has bases in countries like Japan and Germany. I mean, why can't we maintain a presence in Afghanistan as well? Well, these people are incredibly wrong for these reasons. Leaving aside for a moment the way that the withdrawal was handled, again, it is inarguably true that there needed to be a withdrawal. Yes, we maintain bases in Japan and Germany. You could make a very compelling argument that we shouldn't have them there either, especially as those countries are more than capable of defending themselves. But there's also a significant difference here. Japan and Germany are countries, actual real nations. Afghanistan is not. Afghanistan is a medieval third world hell pit with no will to exist on its own accord. I mean, think about it. We armed and equipped the Afghan military for 20 years. Biden claims that it was 300,000 strong. That figure's probably false, like everything else Biden says, but let's use it for the sake of argument. I mean, it was certainly large at any rate. It was a large army, much larger than the Taliban forces, and yet the Afghan army, after 20 years of training, folded in 2 days to a gang of 7th century terrorists who they outnumbered 3-1. The army and the government surrendered, gave up, abandoned ship immediately without even a symbolic attempt at fighting back. Not so much as firing a shot in most cases. They just left. What does that tell us? It tells us that Afghanistan is a country that we built, but we built it like a deck of cards. It needs our constant presence, our sacrifice in blood and treasure simply to exist. The whole country is like the highway system in Afghanistan that we spent billions constructing. Did you know that you spent billions on building highways in Afghanistan? You did. And then the Afghan government and the Afghan people, they let it fall immediately into disrepair. It's now crumbled and largely unusable because the people we built it for refused to maintain it. And that's the story of Afghanistan. It has always been the story. Forcing this country on people who don't want it, have no interest in it. Here's a point that few people will make, but I will, even if it sounds harsh. I want you to look at this footage from the Kabul airport. Here it is here. People are fleeing. You got fleeing Afghans trying to climb onto the evacuation plane as it speeds down the runway, which, by the way, is not a good plan of action. Apparently, some of them actually, you can see them there, they jumped on, you can see them holding to the side of the plane while it was taking off and then fell to their deaths as the plane took off, which, of course, that's how that was going to work out. Now, it's a tragic scene, surely, but it's tragic in more than just the obvious way. Because what else do you notice about this crowd? What do you see? Or more specifically, what do you not see? Women, children. These are almost all men. And you can look at any of the footage of these, stampeding hordes of people trying to get out of Afghanistan. Look at any of the footage, and you're going to see predominantly, almost exclusively men, mostly of fighting age from the looks of it. I mean, these aren't elderly men sprinting down the airport runway. So mostly young men scrambling to leave just as the army left. Can I ask the impolite question? Why aren't these men fighting for their country? We're not going to be guilted now into accepting thousands of them as refugees, not concerned that there could easily be Taliban hiding in their midst. But more to the point, men of Afghanistan do not seem willing to fight to protect the families of Afghanistan. And yet our men should. Our young men should die on Afghanistan's soil to do what Afghan men will not do, refuse to do. It bears repeating over and over again. The Afghan army and the Afghan men, they were not defeated. They just gave up right away. That's it. This is what it comes down to. We cannot hold into existence a country which does not want to exist. We cannot task ourselves with the responsibility of sustaining nations which lack the willpower to sustain themselves. We especially can't do that while our own nation struggles in its own way to exist. And that brings me to the third point. Maybe you remember this tweet from the U.S. Embassy in Kabul just 2 months ago. This is what they were tweeting. Says, the month of June is recognized as LGBTI Pride Month. The United States respects the dignity and equality of LGBTI people and celebrates their contributions to the society. We remain committed to supporting civil rights of minorities, including LGBTI persons. This is what our ruling class has become. This is the kind of empire they seek to build. This is what they want to export out into the world when they're not at home chasing down, other terror threats like anti-maskers and old ladies who trespassed in the Capitol. And when they're not on TV preaching about racial diversity and cultural sensitivity. I mean, one seriously wonders whether our military left copies of White Fragility and, I Am Jazz at the embassy for the Taliban when they took over. I wouldn't be surprised if that was the plan. I would not be surprised. The point is that even if you're a fan of nation building and colonization, and that's what we did in Afghanistan, if you support what we did in Afghanistan and you want to see more of it, you are by definition a colonizer. But even if you like the idea, in theory, the fact is that our government and our military, as it is currently run and constructed, is not capable of building and sustaining a global empire. A government waving rainbow flags and a military indoctrinated into LGBT and critical race theory propaganda cannot be an imperial force, even if it wants to be. Most of the people defending American imperialism abroad seem to want to pretend that we're still the country we were 100 years ago. We're not. And that brings us back to where we started, back at home, in the throes of our own crisis, our own struggle to simply exist, a struggle that calls for all hands on deck. Let the Afghans fight for Afghanistan. If they will not, it will fall. Already has, because they didn't. Just as if we don't fight for our own country, so will it. Well, I hope you enjoyed that clip from the Matt Walsh Show. If you did, go ahead and hit that subscribe button right down there so you can stay up to date on all of our future content.